Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Sajid Lippum. I'm from Maryland, and I'm currently a student at the Islamic University of Medina. So I grew up on a military base called Fort Meade. It's not too far from Baltimore, not too far from Washington, D.C. For those of you who aren't really familiar regarding what it's like growing up on a military base, it's actually a pretty nice environment for families. It's not like a wealthy upper class environment, but you don't have any of the problems that you find in a lot of the lower class communities in America. There's no like drugs, and there's not like a bunch of crime and stuff like that. It's just you have a lot of soldiers living together in close quarters. A lot of people have families. There's lots of kids around. And you also grow up around lots of different types of people, lots of different ethnicities. It's a very diverse environment. Everyone's an American. Everyone is just living together. And I just remember growing up playing sports all the time. That's really what kept me out of trouble. Throughout the year, I was playing basketball, soccer, baseball, taekwondo. I was just always exerting all of my energy into being an athlete in one way or another. Then at the end of the day, after school, after sports, I would, just watch cartoons, play video games, listen to music, that sort of thing. So I had a nice childhood in that regard. As far as religion is concerned, I was raised Protestant, and I had a very, very firm belief in God as a child. In Islam, we understand that there's something called a fitra, meaning that every child is born with this innate belief in God. And I even remember when I was young, my mother, she taught me how to pray. There was a prayer that I would say every night. I would say, Father in heaven, hear my prayer. Keep me in thy loving care. Watch over me in all I do, and bless all those who love me too. And then I would pray for my parents, my sister, my family, and friends. And I remember when my mom taught me this prayer, how I wasn't really taught about God, about his existence, about his names and attributes, but I knew he existed. And it was this really strange feeling. I was like, I don't remember being taught the specifics about God, but I know he exists. It's just something that we all seem to know and understand. Before I even knew what a fitra was, I remember this. And I remember how natural it was for me to understand certain facts about the Creator, about how he was above us, about how he was beyond our comprehension. He was all-knowing, all-powerful. I remember just knowing these things without even being taught them. And throughout my childhood, I always prayed to God. I believed in God. And this was just sort of something that was natural for me growing up. Now, of course, as I got older, I got more mature. I had more complex questions. So I remember one day I asked a question. I asked about Jesus. We'd always hear about Jesus, about him being the Son of God. But at the same time, we were all God's children. So I never worshiped Jesus. I never prayed to Jesus. I always sort of felt like he was this prophetic figure. But as I got older, I wanted to understand more in depth. So I remember asking, what is this situation with Jesus and the Trinity and God and the Son of God? And I was told that, well, Jesus is the Son of God. He died on the cross for your sins. If you believe in him, then you will go to heaven in the hereafter. So that night, as I was going to bed and I said my prayers, I remember saying to God, God, I believe in Jesus. I believe he died for my sins. Please enter me into heaven. And it felt kind of weird, but I wasn't really one at that point to question, my authority figures, the people older than me, my parents and stuff like that. I trusted their judgment, and I thought, okay, well, I guess that's it. I'm going to heaven. So around this time, I'm getting older. You start going through adolescence, and I did have like a children's Bible. I remember sort of reading through it. It was just very sort of confusing, unclear. And now that I believe that I was going to heaven, that Jesus died for my sins, it was just more about, okay, now try to just sort of enjoy your life, live your life. And I think the end of my childhood, when I started becoming a man, I started growing up, was when the transition from elementary school to middle school. That period of my life was a huge change. And it was right around the time that I had this concept in my head that, Jesus died for my sins, I'm going to heaven. So rather than try to get my values about who I should follow, how I should act from God or from a religion, I looked to just the world around me. Back then, just like today, a lot of the youth, they look up to musicians, to rappers, to celebrities, because they appear to be the successful ones, the people who the world love, the people who are rich, who are successful. That's sort of not only who I looked up to, but all of us, all of the youth, all of my friends and peers, we all seem to look up to these musicians and these celebrities regarding how to dress, how to speak, what's cool, what's right and wrong. We sort of looked up to them. They were sort of our role models. Around that time when people are going through puberty, people mature at different rates. I was still this short, skinny guy with like a high-pitched voice, and then I had some classmates who were like twice my size with beards, and they were like grown men. And I was like, man, some of these guys, they could probably kill me with their bare hands if they wanted to. So it was like a very intimidating environment to be in. And very early on, I learned a very valuable lesson. It really changed the course of my middle school experience. One day, I want to say it was probably like within the first couple weeks of school, I went to the bathroom. And when I went to the bathroom, there were these two guys fighting each other. They were really going at it. One of the guys was like really big, and the other guy, he was small, but he was strong, and he was really holding his own. And I remember going in there and seeing them fight, and I just ran out of there. I didn't want to get involved in that at all. So when I got back to the classroom, I was sort of shooken up by what I saw, and I told whoever was sitting next to me, I was like, so-and-so was fighting in the bathroom, and it looked like, such and such was getting beat up by the other guy, and they were going at it and this and that. And when I said this, the guy who I said was getting like beat up, I don't know why I said that. I guess I was embellishing a little bit, but his girlfriend heard me say that. She was like sitting behind me or something like that. So later that day at lunch, I was sitting at lunch. I had some friends that I knew from sports, from basketball teammates and stuff like that. So I was sitting with them, and this guy came up to our table with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend was like, "That's him. That's the guy. He was talking about you." So this guy, he like squared up with me, and he like was ready to fight, and he was like, "Hey, I heard you were talking about me." And I was shook. I was shocked. I was like looking down like, "Nah, man, I wasn't talking about you. I don't know you, man." He's like, "Yo, you better not be talking about me," and this and that. I was like, "Nah, man, I don't know you, man. I wasn't talking about you." And I had some friends with me at that table who had my back, and one dude in particular, he was a tough guy. He wasn't somebody to mess around with, and he started yelling at this guy who was basically trying to fight me. He was like, "Man, get out of here, blah blah blah." They were cussing at each other, yelling at each other, and basically the guy, he proved his point. He came up to me. He was like, "Don't talk about me." My friend sort of proved the point that, "Hey, man, you're not going to be laying any finger on anybody at this table. You better get out of here." So what's done was done. And I became friends with that guy later on in life. But it was a very valuable lesson, man. It really taught me about the environment I was in and how careful you have to be about who you talk about, what you do, and also about what kind of friends you have, who you surround yourself with. Like, it's important that people like you, that you have friends, that people don't want to fight you and this and that. So it was just this crazy environment that I found myself in. And rather than going to school and focusing on, I need to get this education and pass my classes and this and that, there was so many other crazy social things going on around me in terms of fights and in terms of being cool and popular or not, and getting picked on and bullied, and about girls and guys and people acting like, we're like 11 and 12 years old, people acting like, "Oh, you gotta be promiscuous, you gotta sleep around and get girls, or you're lame," and this. And it was just this crazy environment I found myself in. And the conclusion I really came to was that the peers and the people around me, what they considered cool, what they considered to be the right way to live and be, it was basically completely opposite to what the teachers would teach us or what our parents and the adults would tell you. So I remember during those years, it was just this serious clash between me and my parents and the teachers. And it was sort of like the more you rebelled, the cooler you were with your peers to a certain extent. And that was sort of the path I went down for, let's say, like 7th grade, 8th grade. The more I would move up in social status, the worse I would be in terms of like my grades and relationships with the adults. And it was probably the worst year of my life up until that point. And at the end of it, at the end of like my 8th grade, I was pretty much jaded. I was like, man, this is all fake. Everyone's fake. This whole trying to be popular and the teachers and the students and the this and the that, it's all just lame. I was just over it by that point. So around this time, going into high school, I rather than trying to be influenced by what was popular or what my peers said was cool, or even the adults, what they were trying to say is right or wrong, I really turned to music, and that sort of became my spiritual outlet. Like, music was really sort of my religion. Programs started coming out where you could make your own music, produce it, record it. So I started turning towards that. And I learned how to just make graphics, websites, artwork, logos, write music, record music, make beats, work with other people. And that was really like my focus throughout high school, you could say. I believe that that is what I wanted to do with my life. So by the time I was a senior in high school, me and some of my friends, we had been recording music over the past couple of years, and it was like, okay, well, we're seniors now, we're about to graduate, let's release some of this music. So me and my best friend, we released this album, this EP. It had like 8 tracks on it. It was all original music, original beats, artwork, lyrics, everything. So we just came to school one day and we just started, showing it to people and asking them if they wanted to buy it. And people were really impressed. I mean, this was like, we were sort of at the cutting edge of this whole technological revolution where everybody was able to record and do these things. Now this was back in like 2003, 2004 when we were putting this out. So we were sort of ahead of the curve. And when people saw what we were doing, a lot of my friends that I had known over the years through sports and through class and this and that, they were really impressed and they wanted to get involved. So I was like, man, this is really cool. People really are impressed with the quality of what we did. So then I started working with all my friends, and we put together this mixtape for the high school. And I was sort of like in charge of the whole operation. I did the graphics, the track list. I was sort of the one working with the different producers, the people who were mixing and mastering. So I put together this project, and it was very successful. And I sort of realized at that point, this is what I'm going to do with my life. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to produce albums, maybe start a record label, make my own music, record it, do the graphics, the logos. I've already done it. I know I can do it. That's what I want to do with my life. Also, I forgot to mention, this was basketball season. It was my senior year of high school, and I was hoping to maybe get a scholarship and play basketball in college. But that season, I injured my shoulder, and I had to get surgery. So I was out for the season, and basically my basketball career came to a halt. But I really wasn't worried about it, because for the first time, now I could just devote all of my time to music. I didn't have to go to practice and to games and to this and to that. I could just focus purely on music. And also, since it was my senior year, I had to think about college. And if I wasn't going to choose which college I went to based on a basketball scholarship, I had to shop around a bit and see what would be the best fit for me. So around that time, I went to a college fair that was at our high school, and I was thinking that since I love doing music, and also I love doing graphic design and websites and logos and album covers, let me study graphic design. Because even if I don't become rich and wealthy off of music, a good plan B would be to just, get a graphic design job somewhere. I could still do music in my spare time and still have like a day job and be able to pay the bills. So there was a college nearby. It was maybe 45 minutes from my house, just outside Baltimore. And they had a really nice art program. And I went and I checked out their campus. I really liked it. They had these brand new dorms. And I was like, man, I want to go here. And I remember at the time, like, my uncles and everyone was telling me, like, college, it's the best years of your life. You have that freedom. You're around all your friends. You get to just have fun. And then after that, it's like, okay, you have to be a mature adult and get a job and raise a family and this and that. So I was really looking forward to college. So by the end of the summer, by the time I was starting college, I basically had a record label at that point with different artists. We produced an album. So I was going into college with this new album I produced. And basically, I'd say by the end of my first year at college, I basically felt like at that point, I had sort of experienced everything that I had been chasing in life. I already made several albums. I was on my own at the dorms at college, being able to do whatever I wanted to do. And I just started thinking, like, all right, so is this life? Is this what it's all about? You just making music, just trying to have fun, party, hang out with people, do this and that. Is this what the rest of my life is supposed to entail? And around that same time, my grandfather was dying of cancer. And I saw the way that that really devastated my father. And I saw my grandfather on his deathbed, and just going through that whole experience, being confronted with death, realizing that our lives are going to come to an end for sure. Seeing my parents getting older, knowing that I was getting older, I finally just confronted this question that I hadn't thought about since I was maybe in elementary school. And that question was, what's the meaning of life? What's the point? Why do we exist? How do we exist? What happens when we die? Because when I was young, it was sufficient to just say, believe in Jesus, you'll go to heaven. And then I could just chase my desires. But as I got older, I got tired of chasing my desires. And I also started to realize that, this whole Christianity thing, this whole Jesus died for your sins thing, people don't really believe it. Throughout my childhood and as I got older, America in particular really got further and further and further away from religion. And just seeing how people reacted to death, if they really believed that people were going to heaven, why are you so miserable when someone dies? Like, I understand you're going to miss them, but if you really believe that they're in paradise now, you should be happy for them. And also, being in an environment like college, I was realizing that a lot of my professors, the people who were supposed to be the intellectuals, a lot of them didn't believe in God. And I know this because, for example, I was taking art history classes, and a lot of historical art was religious. And I had a teacher who would say very blasphemous things, sort of mock religious figures. And I also had other teachers who would say blasphemous things that basically negated Christian belief. I also worked as a secretary for one of the heads of the department. So I would overhear some of the conversations some of the professors would have, and I heard people saying stuff like, religion, it's just an opiate of the masses. And I was like, man, nobody really believes this. What is life all about? And I just became obsessed with this question. I became completely obsessed. Like, all right, I don't believe in Christianity anymore. I don't believe that you can just chase your desires and be happy. What is the meaning of life? What's this really all about? And as I became obsessed with this question, I would ask people around me, and I realized that, man, people don't know the answer to this question. People don't even want to talk about this question. It was really this sort of weird state I found myself in of confusion and just being appalled that how are we all living in this world and we don't even know what it's all about. So I'll say for the next couple of years, I couldn't think about anything else. I was just obsessed. I was like, all right, well, let me see what these intellectuals have to say about life. So I was studying, atheism, philosophy, history, science, and I would just realize, man, these people, it's just conjecture. These are just human beings trying to think about life, and they just come to their conclusions. There's no real set answer to this. There's no real factual, for sure, answer to this question from these people. So after I felt like I exhausted looking into the human conjecture aspect of why we're here, how we got here, what happens when we die, I wanted to look into some of the more spiritual traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, and these sorts of things. They also just appeared to me like they were just sort of human conjectures. They didn't really have proof for what they believed. And I was getting really deep into my own head, my own thoughts, just trying to think for myself, trying to just figure things out. And then after going through all of this for months and months, one night it just hit me. I just remembered my fitra. I remembered when I was young how natural and how sure I was that God existed. I remembered that feeling I had. And it sort of started to come back to me. This sort of innate understanding that there is a creator. There's one God who created us, who's all-knowing, who knows what's going on. And I wanted to explore that again. I was like, let me look into that. So I wanted to go back into my Christian roots. I went and I bought a Bible, the King James Version. I started listening to Bible radio. I downloaded like an audiobook of the entire Bible. I was listening to Bible study, and I started signing up for classes in college to study the New Testament, comparative religion. And I wanted to really focus on on the Bible and about this feeling I had, this intuition I had of there being one true God. And I wanted to know if this God communicated with us. So the next semester at school, I was taking this New Testament class, and it was taught by an actual preacher. And anyone who's really tried studying the Bible, it's pretty confusing. It's not really easy to read. It's not really easy to understand. It's a huge book. There's lots of stuff that's just sort of hard to understand. So although I was doing a lot of studying, things were still very unclear to me. But there was one thing in particular about this class that I took in college that blew me away. And that was when we were studying how the Bible was compiled. When my teacher was telling us about how human beings came together after so many years and started trying to decide and decipher what would go into the gospel, the New Testament, I was shocked. There was no way I could believe that this was the preserved word of God. I had no idea about how it was translated and passed down, and about how people came together to try to decide what would be put in the Bible. And I just knew that this couldn't be looked at as the precise, exact word of God. I knew that that wasn't the case. So when I started looking deeper into the New Testament, the Old Testament, I started to think, I can have faith in the idea that these scriptures and these things were revealed to prophets, and that some of these stories did in fact happen. However, I can't decipher what is true and what is false, what has been truly preserved and passed down factually versus what has been changed and lost. So around this time, I really just started to understand why Christianity was such a faith-based religion, why so much of it was just based on just having faith and the importance of having faith. Because that aspect of factual proof was lacking. And at that point in my life, it wasn't that I had any sort of preference regarding a particular religion or philosophy. I was very objective about trying to find the truth. If atheism was correct, I was ready to be an atheist. If Buddhism was correct, I was ready to be a Buddhist. So this whole idea of having this blind faith in something was just not what I was looking for. However, I did feel like, okay, perhaps this is all there is. Perhaps God did communicate with people in the past, and we just lost their scriptures. We can't really decipher what's true and what's not. So I was sort of stuck in between Judaism, Christianity, and agnosticism. I believed that there was a God. I felt like that made the most sense, and that it was just part of human intuition to know this. But the specifics about what he wants from us, what's right and wrong, what happens when we die, communicating with him, what happened in the past, I felt like all of that was sort of unknown to a large extent. I still continued studying and trying to find answers to these questions. A lot of it was just sort of internal thinking, praying. It's very easy to become sort of manic in that sort of situation, like looking at coincidences that are happening in your life and just really just trying to make sense of things and figure things out without there being a real clear-cut answer. So one night, as usual, I was thinking about these things. I was trying to study the Bible, and it hit me. I realized I never in my life read the Qur'an. I never really considered Islam. And the reason was because when I was in high school, 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, it really changed America forever. It changed much of the world. When that event took place, I remember we got let out of school early. I remember it was all over the news. They kept showing the buildings falling. And just nothing was the same after that. Like I said, I grew up on Fort Meade, and you used to just be able to come and go on Fort Meade as you pleased. But right after 9/11 happened, they built these gates. They had armed guards there. When you would try to enter, for example, we would try to go to school like normal. They'd stop and pop our trunk and search our car. Of course, now when you went to the airport, they would search everything, and it's just like everything changed after that. Especially coming from that military background, a lot of our friends and family were now going to war, and it was just a really intense, crazy time. And during that time, I went to a website and it was saying, you know, here are some quotes from the Qur'an. They want to kill us. Anyone who's not a Muslim, they want to take over the world. So I just wrote off Islam after that. I didn't personally know any Muslims. No one ever approached me to talk to me about Islam. So from that point on, from the time I was in high school until that moment, to me it was just common sense that Islam was this terrorist religion of lunatics. But that night I realized, you know what? I never read the Qur'an, and I know it can't just be this terrorist religion, because when I was young, I remember seeing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on TV, and I asked my dad, I said, Dad, what kind of name is that, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? And he told me that that's a Muslim name. He's a Muslim. And also there was Muhammad Ali. I knew Muhammad Ali was a Muslim. These are American heroes. And they weren't terrorists, but they were Muslim. So I was like, okay, it can't just be as simple as they're all terrorists. There are Muslims who they just believe in it legitimately as a religion. So let me go read the Qur'an. So as soon as that thought entered into my mind, I went to the computer, I typed in Qur'an in Google, and I clicked the link, and I immediately started reading the Qur'an in English translation. So I clicked on Al-Fatiha, the opener, and I noticed that they had 3 translations for every verse. So I knew that there must have been an original language that this was being translated from, because they had 3 translations for every verse. And as soon as I started reading this book, I knew that this was from the Creator. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, all praises for Allah, Lord of the worlds, Master of the Day of Judgment. I went to Surah Al-Baqarah, the next chapter. This is the book. In it is no doubt guidance for those who believe in Allah. And I got chills. I knew, as clear as day, as clear as the sun is bright, I knew this was from God. This was from the Creator. This was what I had been looking for all these years. I knew for a fact, there was no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Because having spent all those years searching, reading different books, hearing different people explain philosophies and conjectures and stories and scriptures, I knew that this was not from a human being. There's no way a human being came up with this. There was no doubt in my mind this was the truth, that God did give us a scripture. He did preserve it. He did send guidance to us. And not only that, but the more I read it, I realized that it was confirming all those intuitions I had. It was reaffirming my fitrah, telling us about God, there being one God, Him sending the prophets, the day of judgment, the hereafter, talking about Adam, Moses, Abraham, Jesus, all these different things. Everything that I had intuitively believed in, even the things after studying Judaism and Christianity that I felt were true, however they were lost, I found them confirmed in the Qur'an. And I was obviously I was never the same again after that. I was so ecstatic that God did actually send us guidance. Because up until that point, after everything I'd been through, I thought we were just here in this world to just sort of try to figure things out ourselves, not really knowing for certain. No, God sent us guidance and He preserved it. And it's clear as day that this is from Him. No human being could have written this. So from that point on, I was just all day, every day, reading the Qur'an. I downloaded an audiobook of the Qur'an. I'd listen to it in the car. And that was it. I was a Muslim. I knew that this was the truth. And it was so clear to me that I really felt, I sincerely believed at that time, that if I gave other people the Qur'an, that they would see that it was clearly from God. I knew that all these people around me, my friends and family and neighbors and classmates, they never read this book. They don't really know about Islam. I'm going to give them copies of the Qur'an, they're going to read it, and they're going to realize that this is the truth from the Creator. And that was sort of where I was at that time. Instantly, I felt like it was incumbent upon me to give da'wah and to invite other people to Islam. Because Allah guided me, and I knew the situation that these other people were in because I came from the same background as them. I grew up in the same environment as them. And I felt like if I didn't share this message with them, I would be held accountable in the hereafter. So immediately I started trying to give people copies of the Qur'an. And of course, anyone who's tried to give da'wah before, you understand that Allah guides whom He pleases. So that was a hard pill to swallow. In that as I was calling friends and family and people to Islam, they weren't seeing in it what I saw in it. But the point is that I knew, there was no doubt in my mind, the Qur'an was from the Creator. And at that point on, from that point until this day, I've just been consistently trying to learn more and more about Islam. I went and I actually started meeting Muslims, realizing that there are mosques all over Maryland, that there are other people who have had similar experiences to me. I applied to the Islamic University of Medina. I was accepted. To give you an idea of the time frame, the day that I really publicly sort of announced to the world, in a sense, that I was a Muslim, it was August 1st, 2008. That was when I gave up music. I announced to everyone who I'd been working with for all these years and stuff, I was like, look, I'm giving up music. I'm a Muslim now. I want to learn about the prophets, about the Qur'an. And I just started trying to invite people to Islam. In 2010, I arrived in Medina. I spent the first 3 years learning Arabic. And then after that, I've been studying in the College of Da'wah wa Usul ad-Din, which is inviting people to Islam and learning the fundamentals of the religion. Inshallah, soon I will be returning back to the US, and I hope for the rest of my life that I can be involved in inviting people to Islam, sharing some of what I've been taught, some of what I've experienced over the years. I've really benefited tremendously having been given this opportunity to study in Saudi Arabia for all these years, and I'm very excited to start teaching classes, giving lectures, posting more videos and content, just sharing the religion of Islam to those who don't know about it, and also helping Muslims get closer to Allah and learn more about their religion, sharing reminders and benefits. So if anyone is interested in following my work, you can just subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can check all the links in the description. I'm on social media. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to watch this video. Jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah guide all of us to what's best. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.